Okay, we should be live as long as the internet is doing what the internet does and sending electrons to the right places. So fingers crossed, because there's always a bit of a hold up there of like, is this thing actually working? But that being said, it's 1 o'clock on Friday. That means it's time for me to live stream. I'm glad to have Heather Dahl, longtime friend of mine. I feel terrible for her. She's known me for like a decade now. She's like my sister from another mister. And Ken Ebert. Why don't you guys give a quick intro on who you are and what you do?
Well, Indicio, we focus on advancing decentralized identity. And so what we do is we help organizations and enterprises from the very first steps, from what is decentralized identity? How does it work? Who's using it? How do I start to build? So we start with companies there, not only training them about decentralized identity, but also exploring use cases as well. And then what we do is we help support them at any point in their journey towards adopting decentralized identity, whether that means helping them with proof of concepts, building pilots, helping put together demonstrations, building the agents and setting up an ecosystem, all the way to we also run the Indicio network, which is a Hyperledger Indy-based network. We have 3 networks, actually, the test, demo, and mainnet. And in addition to that, we provide hosting and maintenance for organizations who need support with their decentralized identity solutions. And as you know, Chase, it's not just about the technology. It's also about the business development, the sales, the marketing, the governance, the lawyers, right? And so we provide support in all of those areas, because in order to drive the adoption of decentralized identity, you have to bring a holistic approach and bring all the teams together, and we help support that as well.
So, I mean, you guys are running basically all the business side of this whole thing, plus development. That's a lot of stuff to take under. And I mean, I actually run a node on your network, which is kind of cool, because I think this decentralized identity is pretty key in the context of where we're going with the space. I mean, Ken, can you kind of give a rundown on what this actually is? Because I could give my non super deep side of it, but what is decentralized identity for folks that don't really know?
Decentralized identity is a way for businesses, governments, individuals to have control of their own data and their own identity. And it allows a distributed model to let the issuers of data, those people who are making claims about me, sign a credential and give it to me. They put their public key on the network so that anybody that I present the credential to can look up that key and prove that it was signed by the DMV, that my driver's license is indeed valid, that my name and address are correct. And then they can make a business decision based on that. So the idea of taking that data, just like we do with the plastic cards they give you at the DMV, you now have the ability to control that credential and present it to whoever you want to, whenever you want to. And the cool thing about decentralized identity is using selective disclosure or predicate proofs. I can pick which fields I want to share and which ones I want to keep private. And that way I only share the minimum set of data that I need with a verifier to accomplish whatever our interaction needs to have done.
So is verifiable credentials and this whole self-sovereign identity, do you see that mainly as a privacy play, or is this a security play? I mean, where is this going? I think privacy absolutely makes sense, right? And that seems to be but security, is that part of it too?
That's part of it too. What this is it allows for the exchange of information, verified information, without direct database integrations. And how is that done? It's done by the holder. And so in the case of a recent trial that we conducted with CETA in Aruba, this was your COVID, right? You want to exchange your COVID test information. It allowed you to take the credential that showed the test result, and for the traveler to share that with the government without the government having to integrate it all into the hospital whatsoever. And so the security here is you're not dealing with all these centralized databases. You aren't having to do with all these direct integrations. What it does is it decentralizes, right, the exchange of that information.
It does some decoupling, some really interesting decoupling, because no longer do you have to have an individual government integrate with 9,000 hospitals around the United States, and hundreds of clinics and doctors and pharmacies. They can integrate with the holder, and the holder does individual integrations. And because the standards are there, you can have the same trust, because the issuer can be proven to have signed something, but they didn't have to do a direct integration. The loose coupling gets introduced that allows the holder to control the interactions, but reduces the cost for both the issuers and the verifiers, because they don't have to do direct integrations with everybody.
So does this make this makes it where it's more of the, I guess you'd say, the power on this thing in the hands of the user instead of the database, running everything? And I mean, just like you said earlier, right? I've got a driver's license, I have a bank card, I've got my veteran's ID. Those are given to me by an organization. That's my kind of proof. And then you're able to work all that stuff on the magic of the distributed ledger system and do what you do to verify and validate. Is that fair?
That is pretty fair. The interesting thing, though, is that none of my personal data went on the ledger. It only went directly to me. The only thing that went on the ledger were the public keys and the schemas, so that I know what how to decrypt it on the other end and prove who signed it. But the data didn't end up in a large public database or a private database that's a source of a target for hacking. The data went to me. It went directly to Heather or whoever received it. It's about them. They control it, and it's not a huge target. If somebody hacks me, they only get my one record. Great, but there's no central honeypot for the hackers to go after. It's all in my control, and it's not in a central database.
So then this is enabling privacy, right? I mean, that's part of the whole thing. Which I mean, so I guess quickly, if I could ask, like, what's the position you take on like vaccine passports and some folks' idea around like I won't do that because it's got my medical information tied to it. This would potentially solve some of that problem, right?
It solves part of the problem. It takes it out of a central database and it puts it in your control. So it does create that. The other thing that it can do is by selective disclosure, I can only reveal parts of it that I want to share. They don't need to know my weight. They just need to know whether my test passed. So it allows me to control what parts of it can be shared. The other thing that it does is that it removes the liability from whoever's taking the data. They don't have to keep it. They just need to know that I've met the requirements. You can also issue a secondary type of credential that says, okay, the government needs to know whether or not I've had a test or I've recovered or I've got a vaccine. But they can make that determination, and they can issue me a second credential that says, yeah, you passed all those requirements, and I can show that credential to the movie theater, the nightclub, the sports venue, whatever. I don't need to show them any medical data, and I can further insulate myself from having to share that data.
And that's giving you kind of the check in the box of like, look, this is valid by the government. They give the Indominus Patria Fili Santi, and all it says is a big green box of I'm good, I don't have COVID, right? Instead of invasion of my privacy. I mean, and that's stepping away from all the political stuff about like, do you let people in because they're vaccinated or not, or whatever else.
Right. They can decide what is the reason we're going to let you in. Maybe it's that you're vaccinated, maybe that you've tested positive, you have antibodies. We don't know the exact reason why they're letting you in. All we know is that you met the requirements and that you're entering. So it does put the decision factor into the organization that's the verifier. It puts the power in the hands of the individual who gets to selectively disclose only in the information they need in order to get on the cruise ship, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the best way to unpack this into our real world today is when the Department of Motor Vehicles issues you a driver's license, it's not in their mind so you can go buy beer. But let's face it, a lot of people use their driver's license to go have a drink and prove that they're over 21. So Chase, when you go to buy beer and they want to card you, you pull out your driver's license and they look and they say, okay, Chase is really over 21. But what decentralized identity offers is even more powerful than that. First of all, when you went to go buy the beer, the grocery store didn't ping the database of the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? They relied on that card. So the DMV doesn't know how many times a week you went to the grocery store and got carded. That's the first layer of protection and privacy. The next part is when you do show that driver's license today, there are roughly 56 different fields of information. And let's face it, the checkout doesn't need to know that. All they need to know is that you're over 21. They don't even care whether you're 27, 52, or 75, right? They just want to know you're over 21.
Yeah.
So with the predicate proof or zero knowledge proof, it allows you to selectively disclose, I'm only sharing with you that I am over 21. Not my weight, not my address, not anything else. That is all. And I think that takes it to the next level of privacy and control, and also reducing the correlation.
Then, I mean, this makes, like, logically, right, to people, this should make a lot of sense. At least I would hope it would. So then where are you running into the wall with the adoption of this? Is it because people just flat don't understand how this could work and be as useful as you're talking about? Or like, what's the thing of like, nah, I'm not doing that?
Boil the ocean problem. So organizations like, oh my gosh, like that's such, first of all, they see that it does apply to what they're doing, but then they're like, it applies to this and this and this and that and this. And it's just like, it becomes overwhelming quickly, right? To the point of where do you even begin? So we find that the challenges with adoption is actually just starting in a manageable way that's low risk to your organization, that we're not saying you have to rip and replace anything immediately. In fact, you don't have to rip and replace anything. You just have to take the steps of moving towards decentralized identity. And that's where Ken, I think, really excels, is he's created a framework that we call develop a closed loop ecosystem first and scale.
So part of the interesting thing there is to try to find a use case where you control kind of all three parties. And some people will build a wallet and say, well, where are the issuers? But if you have the issuer defined, you have who's going to hold it and how they're going to hold it, what their wallet looks like and how it's going to be operated. And you have a particular verifier that's going to take advantage of it. Like a business trying to open up a factory, for instance. They worked with their local testing center. They issue credentials that are health status. The business uses it to allow people into the factory. That's what I call a closed loop ecosystem, because you've worked with all three of those partners. You haven't tried to solve all the world's problems, just one little problem. And once you've got that credential issued, it may be useful for other pieces. You may use it for proving that you have the training to operate a particular type of machine. You may use it for, once you have the wallet and the ability to use verifiable credentials, you may say, oh, I want to use this to access my the insurance program that my employer provides, and I can bring in a third partner to allow that access to occur. And you can start to use it in other places. But the key thing is to start small and figure out how it is used. Usually by the time you're halfway through the prototype of the first one, you've thought of 3 more use cases. Then you have to prioritize them and put them in the queue after you're done with the first one. But that gets people started.
So, I mean, and that makes a lot of sense, right? So start small, think big, scale fast is what I hear lots of people say. So on the far end of that, if we take this and dial it directly into like a cybersecurity context, it's theoretically possible, and maybe you've already got some use cases of this, of being able to put this into like the identity and access management sort of life cycle for, I know that this user is actually supposed to get to where they go and do what they're supposed to do. Is that fair too?
Yes. That is fair.
And so,
another place where it's very
having those conversations with like companies that do cybersecurity, or is that still pretty far down the road?
So yes, there are different people on different parts of the spectrum, but I think that that's a valid use case, and there are people who are have just had the realization that it can occur there. There are people who are in the process of building, and there are people who have built solutions, and so I think the answer is yes, all of the above.
Mm-hmm. The majority of our interest is coming direct from the global enterprise rather than coming from, let's say, a cybersecurity firm. And so the global enterprise is coming with, we want to issue credentials to prove, for instance, this is an employee. And that employee then can access something on our campus, right? So we're getting direct from the companies themselves, not necessarily from vendors in the security space who offer security solutions. And so the majority of our use cases, implementations, and deployments are working directly with maybe a brand or a company.
So I mean that's a pretty big, like that's a bigger part of that whole equation than just the cybersecurity identity and access management side of things. Fair?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, because I think you talked about this too earlier, and we should probably make this point clear to folks. Is like when you say this works in this context, it's for verifiable, valid sort of ID credential type things, structured data. This is not like that thing where people say, "Oh, we've solved all your data security problems with this magic thing that we sprinkle on whatever." This is for sort of formulaic, structured things within an infrastructure.
That's a really good application of it. Yes.
I mean, you could potentially, it would be really difficult though, process compute and all the other things wise to be able to do this on an unstructured sort of fly by night type of data ontology or those types of things, right?
It's you can still do it on that. It's just, it shines best when you have a structured data set.
Right.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, at least with Indicio, is we don't have a proprietary platform or proprietary. We developed open source code, as well as companies who do want to work with proprietary tools in this space. So there are other companies that offer a variety of proprietary platforms that are very powerful for the specific use case, and we will work with those companies to implement and deploy those solutions as well. So for a company coming to us, they're saying, I want to adopt decentralized identity, verifiable credentials into my use case. Can you help us put together the architecture, work through which vendors we should integrate with, whether we should develop from our agents from the open source code base from scratch? We work through all those. So you think of us more as we're your Sherpas through the decentralized identity journey. And we work to find what's right for your organization rather than just saying, oh, you have to plug in to our platform.
And then you guys have got like stuff on Linux project and that type of thing, right? As far as open source.
So we participate in a number of Linux Foundation projects. The Hyperledger Indian Aries are some of the core technologies that we use. We also are participants in the Linux Foundation Public Health Initiative to promote privacy-preserving health status type of credentials, so that that a good solution is available worldwide. But typically, we try to look at what the customers' end needs are and match up either public open source type of solutions or proprietary vendor solutions that will help them meet their need.
Are you guys working with the Department of Veterans Affairs? Because God, I'd love it if you'd solve that thing where I don't have to go in there and fill out the 10 pages of paperwork every time I go to the same VA office. Like if I just walked in there and said, "I'm me, swear to God, here's my cred, life goes on," that would be worth all of the hassle.
Yeah, we wish we could say that, but they know how to reach us, so you can hook us up next time.
Yay, Veterans Affairs, look up Indicio, please.
And let them know. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of situations that we get brought, the really tough, difficult identity. Like we get sent all the problems, and then our team is really, really good at taking complex situations and peeling out the layers and putting together a solution. That's where we excel. And that's why we do have this open, neutral standpoint, is we look to solve the problem, and then we find the tools and the solutions to bring in and move it towards decentralized identity. And part of that too is we have the node operator community. You're operating a node, but we have companies that are part of that community who are also not only who are in the decentralized identity solution space, and they're a great resource too as well. So we find ourselves partnering with our node operators and putting together solutions for clients.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of stuff in the news lately. Like I think IBM's been in there with some of the things that they're doing. I've seen some other big players that seem to be kind of dabbling in this, and they'll put out some some Hyperledger stuff over here, some Aries thing over there, or they'll talk about another blockchain-y type thing. Is that just because you think they're getting into it and kind of feeling the water out? Because you guys have been in this longer than most folks, as far as I know.
Yeah, so IBM was one of the earliest supporters of Sovereign, which is another Hyperledger Indy-based network. They have been working on decentralized identity as well and blockchain. There are a number of other companies who've been in this space on the solution side. Workday, for instance, was an early. But where we look in our community, we have some leadership from ID Ramp, is an enterprise solutions platform. They have a really strong taking your employee identity, getting rid of password login. I mean, you may enjoy password login, but ID Ramp
every day.
Every day.
I'm the kill the password guy. I hate password.
Yeah. I love setting my password at least 3 or 4 times a day. But if you don't like that, ID Ramp actually has a great password login, what we call it, remover, a great solution that just gets rid of that problem. And I think, in fact, we at Indicio believe that if we run a decentralized identity company, we need to be using decentralized identity solutions.
Wow.
And so we just actually started putting the ID Ramp credential into our own system to get rid of the password login, but also to provide verification to go into our Slack channel, to join our Zoom meetings. So that's what's really cool about using these solutions out there, is we can show, and then we like to go out and talk about our experience in removing the friction in our business.
So you guys are in DCO, you're using ID Ramp as part of your distributed infrastructure to do those things, and you don't have passwords. Is that what you're saying? Like,
we're moving away from it. But it's not that we're passwordless, but we have started the journey to go passwordless.
You're password reducing.
Password reduction.
We're on a password diet.
Yes.
Right. A password diet, right? You're like Weight Watchers for passwords.
And the first 2 places we started taking passwords out of our life has been Zoom and Slack.
And so now when you authenticate, you just auth. It doesn't do any of the other stuff. And that's because it's passing stuff between the nodes to validate that you are who you say you are.
It's passing the verifiable credential that we issue to our employees.
And that's what you're, and that's so, because I guarantee somebody will ask the question about, like, well, what if somebody hacks Ken, right? Then does that compromise the entire thing? Like, how do you negate the risk there?
So there is some prudence that's required to attach the verifiable credential to a person as well as to a piece of tech. And so some biometric access to the wallet provides that first level of kind of assurance that
thumbprint, something like that,
face recognition, whatever. It's the idea of how do you control access and prove that who's operating the tech on the other end.
And that's like an out-of-band authentication, just like everybody has with SMS or whatever, and that type of thing, right?
So the out-of-band is providing the verifiable credential to prove that it's me, and they can pretty well know that it's me.
Right, and then you're running a biometric for the, actual. This is And funny thing you talked about that, because I had somebody when I was doing a workshop, we were talking about biometrics as part of authentication. They said, well, what if someone gets my thumb? And I was like, you have bigger problems than security if they've got your thumb.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say call a hospital perhaps, or seek medical attention. I don't know if they've got your thumb or your face is even worse. Like that could be even more problematic.
If I don't have my thumb, the last thing on my mind is going to be my password.
Yeah, it was one of those times where I had to sit there and think, like, are they screwing with me? Is this an actual argument? But okay, sure. All right, so follow on to that, because this would be another question that I would get from somebody is the ransomware shenanigans that are going on right now, right? I could see the potential for a solution set like this, not necessarily doing the magic thing and fixing the entire problems, but being able to be applied to help limit some of the risk from bad creds causing logins to eat systems alive with ransomware. Is that a fair statement as well, or is that a bridge too far? Because somebody's going to ask me.
No, I think that's a step in the right direction to getting rid of the ransomware problem. It bumps up the level of kind of the first level of leaked password, username and password being breached as a mechanism for getting in and wreaking all kinds of havoc with a system. But that does raise the barrier to hackers. Go hack someplace else. They're not going to get in that way.
Right.
Yeah. Which is what you want. I mean, that's why people put ADT signs up in front of their house and don't have ADT, because they want the bad guy to go next door. You know, it's a good deterrent. Okay, so following on from there, where is this going over the course of the next 3 years? I mean, or adoption take off like right in the hard left, or where are we going?
We're there. You know, I can walk you through some of the interesting decentralized identity things that I use in my life right now.
Yeah, because that's what I think. I think people don't understand. They think this is like too far fetched. And I mean, people argue with you about blockchain being, BS, whatever. But I mean, you guys are actually using this in a real use case sort of scenario.
Yeah. We talked about our password diet that we're on, and I don't know. Well, this is my phone. So these are like really in my phone I talk about. And so I have the ID Ramp Passport wallet here. And when I want to use my employee credential from Indicio, I basically scan the QR code and it sends the credential that I'm an employee, and I can go into our Zoom meeting right that way. And then you also can do it so you don't have to scan every time, but we won't go into that kind of detail right now. But that's just right here on my phone, ready to go. The other wallet that I think is cool that I'm using is Liquid Avatar. And this one is cool because, well, I just got myself, they use a strong biometric play here. But the fact is we have multiple identities in our life. It's not just, Heather and Indicio, but it's Heather in personal life, maybe Heather in a hobby. We have different personas. And so what Liquid Avatar has done is you can create your own avatars for each role in your life. So let's say Heather the student, I create an avatar, but that's how I organize my credentials is through those different personas. And so that's what's really cool about their wallet. They're based out of Canada, and I think Ken's been supporting them as well on this, and there's some cool things that they're doing that's already available. You can download the Liquid Avatar.
It's a really kind of an interesting approach. A lot of people have gone with straight mobile play, and Liquid Avatar has a custodial agent that they host in the cloud. Only the end user has access to whatever's in that wallet, but they have the ability to then use their mobile app to control it. If you're out fishing and drop your phone over the boat and into the bottom of the lake, get a new phone, reestablish through biometrics that it's your account, and then you have all your credentials are preserved in the cloud. It does help with both the security access of the data on the wallet, but it also helps with the account recovery in case of lost phone.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then the other one here that I use is the Global ID wallet. And what I like here is with the whole thing with WhatsApp and the privacy, I didn't like WhatsApp to begin with, but a number of people are like, I'm trying to find another solution to communicate other than WhatsApp. So people started piling into Global ID, and they have not only a chat text feature that's based on decentralized identity. You have to prove who you are and get your identity validated before you can even start chatting. So when I text here to my friend Trevor, I know it really is Trevor because he's had to go through the verification process, but it also has video as well. In addition, I can create verified groups where everyone in there has been approved and has gone through KYC. But it also has credentials that says, yes, this really is my email. This is my voter registration. It also has my diplomas in it. So I can share my college degrees using decentralized identity. They also have their wallet using the Indicio network as well.
So, okay, so all of that's there.
One of the cool things is that as you start to see more credentials being issued is the use of credentials in combination. And so you can start to see combining an employee credential with a health status credential, with a certification of training credential, and all of those things can be used in conjunction to say, I am an employee, I am safe to enter, and I have the skill set needed to operate the piece of equipment. So you can combine those things. You can mix and match from them, and that's one of the nice things. It's the same way that we do it with our paper or plastic credentials that we use in the physical world. Those types of ad hoc interactions are now made possible because the technology supports it, and there are starting to be sufficient issuers of the various types of credentials to be able to make it interesting to use them more analogously to the way we use the paper and plastic ones.
So we got a question here. Okay. You guys. So James Reeds asked, "What are some of the implications of this around the European Union's announcement of an EU-wide ID?"
Actually, that's a great leadway into the news that happened this week. The Linux Foundation Public Health Project hosts Cardia, which is open source code that was contributed by Indicio and also CETA, based on trials that we ran in Aruba. I guess it was last month. And part of what Linux Foundation Public Health has been working with the European Union specifically around the COVID digital certificate that they've already announced. And so the challenge there is, well, if you're in the EU, that's great, but what does the rest of the world do? Is that you're in the EU and you want to leave, or the rest of the world wants to go to the EU, great, what's going to happen there? And so Linux Foundation Public Health made an announcement that a number of organizations, I think it was about 10, including Indicio, are working with Linux Foundation Public Health. The European Parliament was a part of that announcement to help bring tools and resources for the rest of the world to develop and support the digital COVID credential in the EU, but also vice versa. And Ken was an integral part of that effort.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at. There's been a number of different approaches. Some of them are very centralized and store your data with one of the big tech companies and give you no decision-making capability. So a government doesn't get to decide what the rules are, and they're basically subscribing to somebody else's rules. One of the things that we did with the Cardia project is to make the rules decentralized as well, so that each government or each entity can determine the rules and who they want to trust and what the rules might be. That's important in a situation like we have today with COVID, where the science is changing, and what might be considered safe today might not be considered safe. A different set of rules might come into play, and having a looser set of rules to be allowed to flexibly change those by the people who determine them is one part of it, and then creating mechanisms for the different ecosystems to be able to coexist and interoperate is another one. So looking at integration points between how do people who are being issued paper credentials that is a PDF that you got in the email, how do you turn that into something that's more trustworthy and less fraud prone, and allow people to rely on that? And so those are some of the interesting discussions that are going on right now.
Yeah.
This concept behind, paper credentials, we see that a lot with diplomas, right? Or LinkedIn and diplomas that are made up and put in there. And so one of the things that, like in the real world, if you were to go to my LinkedIn page, you'll see on there that I've listed decentralized identity training. And given it's me, you probably believe I did it. But I don't know if she really completed her decentralized identity training. Well, actually, there's a link on there that you can click, and you can go to and check, and you can go through to the chain and see how it was actually issued. And Entrusty is the company that is doing that. And it's great for the decentralized identity training. In fact, we issue those to anyone who's completed Indicio's training to put on their LinkedIn. But there it is. It's being used today. It's in LinkedIn. You can go out and test it now. You can actually see how it was issued. And I think that's a great example of where we're going, whether it's digital credentials in the EU or elsewhere, is that they're coming on. They're being adopted and used right in front of our eyes. Maybe I think people don't necessarily see them.
Yeah, I mean that's super interesting. It's funny that James asked about the EU-wide ID, because we have that. What's the thing here in the U.S. The driver's license thing you have to have to travel. The what?
With the star on your driver's license.
Yeah, because the funny thing is I I jumped through all the rigmarole to get mine and did all the stuff, whatever else. And when I looked at it, when they issued it to me, I'm 6'5". They transposed the numbers, so I'm 5'6". And so, like, every time I've been flying or whatever recently, I hand it to somebody and I hold my breath for a minute, waiting for them to be like, "Wait a minute." But so far, no one's caught that error.
Right. Well, I mean, this is where if the original issued, it can be a derivative credential of what they've already given you that says, yes, you've met the additional requirements. In that case, you had to prove that you actually lived here. Yes, they brought in their proof of their utility bill.
Right.
And now you get the next level of credential.
So could this also be something that, I mean, potentially could be applied to like the migrant crisis and things that are going on across borders, globally, of people, if they have, some sort of credential, you could basically be able to do better. Are we taking care of this individual? Are they someone that we're continuing to see crossing board, that type of thing?
But there's two aspects to
Everybody's got a phone. They don't necessarily always have an ID, but I've never seen somebody without a phone.
Some of them don't have phones too. So there needs to be mechanisms to allow for people who have nothing, they're destitute, to be able to establish their identity. And then in perhaps those cases, a custodial agent might be more appropriate instead of trying to put it on a mobile phone they don't have. But issuing them a credential does two things for them. One is it helps establish and weed out the bad players, but probably more importantly, it allows us to take care of the good actors in a way that's not as costly. So right now, vaccinations are given multiple times, the same vaccination given multiple times, because there's not good records of who's received what. And so you cross one more border and you get the vaccination one more time. But if you could, verifiably prove that what the care has been thus far, then the targeted care can be more selective about using resources that are in short supply to only apply those to the people who really need it. It will improve their health outcome, and it will reduce costs for the people providing those vaccines. So there's a number of mechanisms that are in play for those people without good identities that I think could help them along. We could tie them, like I said, to a hosted type of credential or a wallet that allows them to hold their credentials in a way that gives them a stronger form of identity and allows them to have some of the benefits that are being not available to them right now because of a lack of identity.
So pretty broad applicability. I would guess. I guess this is really just a thing of a time horizon, right? Where it's making its way into things, and it will continue to show and grow in adoption, because y'all are sitting in a good spot, because there's standards that are requiring this, there's technology which is enabling it, and then there's a need with users and the industry and a whole bunch of industries to make this thing a real, because people, not being able to know that this identity is actually valid is a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch. You can look at some statistical measures to look at the adoption curve. Typically, we have three networks that we host: a test network, which we test out the new technology of the network, new releases and so forth. But that and also the developers are using that right now to try out their solutions to see how well they're working, and then that's a leading indicator. And then on the main network, that lags behind that. But if you look at the test network growth of number of writes, that is an exponential curve right now, and that's really kind of fun to watch that happen. The number of writes on the network are actually quite small. You only write the decentralized identifier of the issuer, a schema, and the public key stuff. And so the number of writes might be 3 to set up an issuer ready to write something, but then they might issue 100,000 credentials from that same set of keys and schemas. And so the number of writes is quite small, but it represents a larger number of credentials that are being issued. And so watching that growth curve on the test net is exciting to see people ramping up their experimentation and getting ready to go live.
Right. I mean, just overnight, we had over 1,000 writes to the network. And the thing about the testnet is it's open for all. You can go to a self-serve portal and start using it. So sometimes we don't even know who is using the testnet. That's the whole point, is we're out here offering the test and demo net and the main net to help companies move along. And they may also encounter challenges along the way. And that's where we're here, to answer those questions and get them going. So For us, we're a mixture of full implementation partner, but we're also homework helpline. So if you just have a quick question, we've got teams that can, field those questions and help get you along the way as well.
So, I mean, a follow-on question to that, because since you kind of brought me to that thinking, was if I'm somebody that's going to run off and create a use case for this, an app or something like that, like how do you figure out how to make money on this? Because money is the universal grease, right? So where would I be able to make some money or do something that's going to reward me for going through the rigmarole of setting this up and being on that ledger system?
There's a number of mechanisms for making money. The first one, the one that many people are looking at right now is simple cost reduction in an area of their business. And that's to reduce the friction of login, to make it more easy for their customers to interact with them, reduce the wait times in establishing identity on a support call. They're looking at cost reductions as a primary mechanism. Also, a number of people are starting to look at the expense of a KYC type process and reusing that KYC effort instead of having to spend the time and effort in order to do that. Also, to reduce the risk of transporting people to a work site where they don't have the qualifications. You can do the pre-checks before they even get on an airplane to go there. Those are in the cost reduction type of side of things. But the payment on issuance of credentials, that's something we're already familiar with. I already had to pay, I think, $30 to get my driver's license last time I renewed it. But those types of payment on issue, and then there's payment on verification. Payment on verification is less mature in the indie market right now, but that's an area of future consideration to look at how to do those types of value transfers that naturally occur with credential usage today.
Okay, cool. All right. So last couple of things, like where is enterprise with this? I mean, where's the next big hit? Everybody's always asking about where does this go from interesting use case, getting some adoption, sort of curving up to the right. But I mean, what's going to happen that's going to make this, take off like a hockey stick, or not take off like a hockey stick, but hockey stick curve?
Well, I think we're feeling it right now. Is the first step was just getting organizations issuing and verifying credentials, even within their own organization, let's say, or between departments within their organization, or very contained partnerships, maybe one other partner. Well, they've successfully done that. And now they're starting to grow their ecosystems to multiple partners, where those partners issue credentials and share them amongst each other. And while it sounds simple, like, oh, just coming over to the party, there's some work that's done. And we are seeing those ecosystems already starting to emerge, organizations that are coming to the table saying, okay, we have strategic interests here. Let's sit down and make these ecosystems interoperable amongst each other. And so we're seeing all the different organizations starting to come together and form smaller ecosystems. Eventually, those ecosystems will start combining up. And we are in the, I would say in the late, almost heading to the middle of forming those smaller ecosystems right now. And Ken and I spend the majority of our time working with those partners in putting those together.
Previously, I think there were some inhibitors. One was the lack of the complete set of open source tools. And I think Indicio has helped solve that problem. And the tool set is now complete. And you're seeing that growth in the adoption as that tool set is matured and is available. There's things happening in the decentralized identity community to improve performance or get better signature methods, promote interoperability, but the tool set itself is mature enough to get the use cases to production, and you're starting to see that happen. It depends on the speed of the organization, on how fast they can get from getting started to deployed, but it's there and available, and you're starting to see people on a larger scale start to deploy.
So wrapping up, I want to ask the question that everybody's been sort of bouncing around about what blockchain, right? When you hear people market and offer blockchain as a thing, does that make your skin crawl? Do you throw stuff at the TV? Like, what's your feeling on the market side of blockchain?
I'm just kind of numb to it in the sense of it's a tool. Like, you got a blockchain, that's awesome. Now what, right? What are you going to do with this blockchain? So I only get excited when you talk about solving the use cases, and blockchain is a part of how you solve the use case, because a blockchain by itself, without people using it, isn't that exciting.
Yeah, blockchain is like it's a hammer. Great, you got a hammer, good. Everything's a nail. But the thing that if it's done well, a lot of people won't know that it's a blockchain doing it. It should. If my end customer has to know that they went out to a blockchain in order to get their verifiable credential, I exposed too much of the tech to them, and I made their life more complicated instead of simpler. If they go to a website and say, "Hey, I don't need a password anymore," my app will just automatically, push a notification to me, say that, "Did you really want to log in?" I click yes, or I hold it up to my face and it's me, and it logs me in. That's what I want. I don't want anybody talking about blockchain. I want them talking about the benefits that they're getting and the fact that the technology makes their life easier. That's when I consider myself having won.
I'm sure when the first hammer was created, it was all the news. Like, everyone was
best hammer. It was the most amazing hammer there was.
I am sure it just rode the hype cycle. But then someone built a house.
Yeah. Right. And then they started saying, I need a wrench too. Right.
Right. Yeah. And the hammer, while very important, it just became a tool that was used to build the house. And we're in house building. When it comes to blockchain. Blockchain is a tool in your toolkit. You should have, that option to go to it. You should understand how to use it, how it works. But blockchain alone is not that exciting for me.
That's super. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on my live stream here and talking about all these interesting things. Hopefully some folks got some learning about what this whole thing is and how it's being applied. I'm a big fan of self-sovereign identity. I've got a node on your network. I think, everybody should be paying attention to this and seeing where it's going. So Heather, Dahl, and Ken from Indicio, really appreciate your time and look forward to bigger, better things coming on the blockchain hype cycle.
Thank you, Dr. Zero Trust.
Thank you, Dr. Zero Trust.
All right, everybody have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.